Denise Moore, the lovely and talented Denise Moore, asks, could the country ever get so far removed from reality that there simply wouldn't be anyone to convey an actual account of our heritage and history to straighten us back out? I'll tell you, it certainly feels that way, doesn't it, Denise? It feels like, it feels like these simple facts, these simple truths are so far away. I really got angry earlier today with a couple of comments, and a couple of days ago too. Sort of moral equivalence between Russia and America. America has manifest destiny and slavery, and please. So it's the pot calling the kettle black. There's really no difference between Russia and America. Well, there's a lot of difference between Russia and America. As I said, we fought a civil war and a revolution without a single political reprisal, and they fought a civil war and a revolution and murdered 30, 40, 50 million people. So there is a difference. And the thing that's so shocking about this is not so much, gee, how did you get to know all this stuff about the history of the Russian secret police? The question is, why doesn't everybody know this about the Russian secret police? This is not, in 7-8 minutes on that firewall, you got the basics of it. Why doesn't everybody know this? There's a movie I saw after I wrote this thing, and I'll probably put a post up about it. It's called The Chekist. It's a Russian film, Chekist, for somebody who worked for the Cheka. It's a Russian film. It's, I think, about 2009. It's available on YouTube. If you search for it, you can find it with English subtitles. It's a fairly low res. It is something that I think everybody... If I could make American kids watch one movie, we said, well, if you could make people watch one movie, what would it be? It would be The Chekist. Prepare yourselves. The main thing that most Americans will find really just disturbing about it is there's just nothing but endless full frontal nudity. Nothing but full frontal nudity. Men and women both, and these are not magazine models. These are regular people. And the reason there's so much full frontal nudity in The Chekist, and it's nothing but non-stop full frontal nudity, is because The Chekist takes place in the basement of the Lubyanka, where people are brought in 5 at a time, and they're just shot to death in front of a series of wooden boards. And then they're put on a meat cart, and then they're hauled up, feet first, up a chute, put in a cart, and driven away. So you see lots and lots and lots of dead bodies, and that's why that movie is so effective, because it opens with the scene of an execution, and there's all that horror, and you can kind of connect to it, and you can kind of get a sense of, oh my God, this wasn't a joke, this actually happened. There are actual faces. I can see people's faces. There are these individuals. And then, to the enormous credit of the filmmaker, he doesn't just show 5 people or 20 people being killed in an opening scene. He goes back down into the basement again and 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 again. I bet you in that movie I saw 300 faces of people who saw that happen. People asking what it's called. It's called The Chekist. It's from the Cheka. Cheka was the name of the Soviet secret police in the very early days of the revolution. And the Chekist is somebody who worked for them. A Chekist is a member of the Cheka. Chekist, I think, the Chekist. And it is on YouTube. You got to search for the version with English subtitles. Somebody just playfully said, Dave Big Booty, or Big Booty, said, nudity? Hey, it's a perk. It's not a perk in this movie. This is not that kind of nudity. This, as I said, is not bikini model nudity. This is not like the teenage horror slasher film where the beautiful cheerleader takes her top off. This is just regular people, stark naked, being shot in the back of the head, falling down into a pile, being hauled up by their feet with a rope and thrown into a meat cart. That's the kind of nudity it is. Yes, Cheka, Winston Smith, it was the original KGB, was the first real state secret police, was the Cheka. It's a hard watch. It's not something you want to watch with kids. And it's the actual violence, there's no gore in it. It's not a bloody movie in any real way. It's just awful. And it's awful because even though you only see 200 or 300 people of the 300, who am I kidding? Millions of people, you realize it just keeps coming. And there are little moments. One of them, some of them seem so unnatural, but the idea of just walking up to a wall and waiting to get shot in the head seems unnatural. It seems unnatural to me. The first essay I ever wrote was about this idea that I just don't think Americans would line up. I just don't think we would. Maybe I'm wrong. And one of the things I learned from Life and Fate is that This is a profound insight in Life and Fate. He said, once people have you naked, your ability psychologically to resist is really greatly reduced. I had never given that a moment's thought before, ever, but I bet that's absolutely true. Just the fact that you're standing there naked, really, I can say really, that would just really cut a lot of the legs out from your ability to resist. But with all that said, maybe it's wishful thinking on my part. They were shot with revolvers, right? They were shot with revolvers from 6 feet away. With that said, you got a small room that's barely, 10, 20 feet wide. You've got 5 Chekist executioners with pistols, and you got 5 people, one up against a wall, and you got one guy shooting each one of these people in the head one at a time, and a guy with a stick going, fire. If it were me, look, once you're in that room, you're not getting out of that room alive, right? Everybody knows you're not getting out of that room alive. Once you're down there, you're going to die. There's not going to be a big Tom Cruise escape. But I just cannot imagine, for Americans, I just can't imagine us just lining up, waiting to go. When it's not like there's an army there. It's not like there's guys with machine guns there. There's 5 guys with pistols, and there's 5 naked people just screaming, yeah, and they're sick. And they're not 30 feet away. They're 5 feet away. I do it, man. I really do. I really would rather. I would rather go out that way. I know it's easy to say. I'm perfectly willing to admit I might be wrong about this, but on the other hand, I think about this a fair amount. I think about it a fair amount, and I actually think. I think I've thought about it enough so that I would be prepared in a way that these people were not prepared. I'm mentally prepared to do something like that. I really just don't see Americans doing it. I just don't. I'm not saying there wouldn't be many, if not most of the Americans would do it. I'm sure many, if not most people, would just stand there. But we would fight back harder than this. And these people have just been so beaten down by oppression for so long, they just, what else can they? They don't know anything else. They don't know anything better. But here's the reason I wanted to take this question, is because, Denise, the only thing I actually have come to really fear is the state. I've done so much reading this last year on the Nazis first and then the communists, and it's the power of a state gone mad is really the only thing in this world to genuinely fear. When a weak-chinned chicken farmer has the ability to exterminate 10 million people, and when you look at the people who are in position of authority during the Nazi regime, they're all lunatics. And I don't mean they're lunatics because they wanted to kill people. No, I mean they're garden variety lunatics. They're garden variety lunatics. These people are not like, they had a mad plan for world domination in the way that like Blofeld is mad in a Bond movie. Oh, Mr. Bond, I have a laser orbiting an orbit. No, they're barking mad. They're just barking mad, crazy garden variety neurotics, paranoids, and sociopaths. They're just regular crazy. And for them to run the government is just, what do you say? I mean, you can make a pretty good case. I think I've said this before. I don't know if I've said it on the show. You can make a pretty good case. Given the fact that when you get into the industrial murders of these socialists, 200 million people maybe, given the fact that historical battles are actually only dealing with relatively small numbers of people, somebody could sit down and do the math and say the greatest killers in human history are disease, and then socialism, and then war. I bet you war comes after. I bet it does. It'd be close. And of course, the one thing you see, and this is the thing, of all the things that drive me crazy, this is it. It's like, Stalin, Stalin was, how can you equate communism with Stalinism? Stalin wasn't, communism wasn't Stalinism. Stalin, you hear this all the time from these D-bags, these Marxists and socialists. No, you're equating communism with socialism. No, you're equating Stalinism with communism. No. It's that was an aberration. How dare you compare the two? Well, my response would be, so Stalin was an aberration. Yes. And so Mao was an aberration. He was an aberration. He killed 50 million people. And Hitler, with his National Socialism, he's an aberration. Yeah. And Pol Pot was an aberration too, was he? Yeah. And Castro in Cuba murdered all those people as an aberration too. Yeah, that was an aberration. And what about down in Venezuela, Chavez as an aberration? Yeah, it's an aberration. There's a lot of aberrations, actually, isn't it? A lot of aberrations. Funny how that works. It's not an aberration. It's the ultimate byproduct. It is the ultimate byproduct because when you have a powerful state that is dependent on creating heaven on earth, then that state will be used. If heaven on earth is not being achieved, somebody's got to be responsible, and those people will be killed. For the greater good, of course. And that's what happens. And when I had this thought recently, and I'd love to get some feedback on this, because it's a little out there, but I think there's some truth to it. So people say, well, yeah, it's true, the communist Chinese and the Russians and the Germans and the Vietnamese and the Cambodians and the Cubans and all the rest of those socialists, yes, it's true, they went too far. But look at socialism in Sweden or look at socialism in France. See, it works just fine. I'd not thought about this before. I think socialism in Sweden works. Sweden, let's take as an example. Sweden, Finland, lovely societies, peaceful, decent, everybody's happy. Everything's equal, great deal of egalitarianism in Sweden. So let's use Sweden as an example. Sweden has not turned into Stalin yet because of the United States military. That's my thesis. Sweden can afford to be kind, gentle socialism only because of the capitalist titan across the ocean that is defending Sweden from the people who will bring you the other kind of socialism. There's two reasons why Sweden can, for the time being anyway, afford to be nice socialism. Number one, they can afford to be nice socialism because they don't have to pay for a military. If Sweden had to defend itself against Russia, I don't think they'd have their socialist state. There was a time when Sweden did have to defend itself against Russia. There was a time when Finland fought Russia to a standstill. Those days are over. Why can they afford their socialist state, which is so loving and kind and gracious? Because you and I as Americans are paying for the defense of Sweden. That's why. That's why. Because we're paying for their defense. And if they had to pay for their defense, they wouldn't have the money to have their socialist state, especially in the face of what's going on next door in the country with the big bear in it. And I'll go further. If America was not here to defend them, they would be overrun by the more virulent brand of socialism. So without America or the West, without capitalist countries, Sweden would either be swallowed up by Russia or it would have to spend itself into defending itself against Russia, and it couldn't defend itself against Russia. It's the presence of the capitalist countries that allow these people to have their socialism. I'll stand by that. I really will. I think that's absolutely it. If you were to take that away from them, they couldn't have this little island of stability in an unstable world. They have cradle-to-grave socialism because they don't pay for defense. We pay for their defense. And even if they had to pay for their own defense, if we were just out of the picture, then it'd just be a question of, well, okay, the Russians or somebody else, or the Chinese or somebody else would simply say, well, we have the power of the state behind us, and we're going to go and take Sweden. And what are you going to do about it? That's what happens. It's not what happened once. It's what happened. It's what happens every time. It's not an anomaly. It's not an aberration. When you empower the state and destroy the individual, individuals will be destroyed. And they'll take everything because they didn't make it. And they don't know how. And so when I hear people equating America and Russia, I just lose my mind. I just absolutely go off the deep end. Because when you see a movie like The Checklist, you realize that 680,000 people killed in 1 year is not a number. Those are individual people. It's everybody in Baltimore. And you have to see their faces. I got a little bit off track there when I was talking about some of the things these people say as they go in to get lined up. There's this one woman. They all know they're going to die. It's not like they don't know they're going to die. Some people are trying to say, I have secret knowledge about gold that's buried outside of town. It's not a bad idea, actually. Good for you. One person or two fights back. One woman bit a guy on the arm. I was cheering out loud, as actually shouting. It's like, yeah. But most people would have something to say, or they have. But this one woman knew she was going. She was probably a former aristocrat, good-looking woman, naked, walking to the wall with all the bullet holes in it, with all the other naked people facing the wall, 6 feet away from the guys with guns. And she turned to the guy who was walking to the wall and said, "What about my cats? Who's going to feed my cats? I mean, will you take care of my cats?" it just had such truth to me. It was just such an odd thing and such an unusual thing, but it just seems so true to me. You know, that's what you would worry about, is you're about to be murdered by your own government. I don't know where I said this. I think I said it on Trifecta, or maybe I said it on a members-only Trifecta. One of the things most remarkable about these socialists, these communists especially, it's such a religious experience for them. It is a religious movement, and it is a religious experience. And so when all these people were being shot, especially the first group that they shot, the old Bolsheviks, they called them, the people who actually led the revolution against the Tsar, they were the first people killed because they were the biggest threat to Stalin. So all of Lenin's comrades were killed. All the people that were the heroes of the Civil War were killed. All of these old school communists, the actual revolutionaries, were killed. And there's two things I want to say about that. First of all, for us to get our minds around that, try to imagine that John Adams takes over for George Washington, and once he's in office, he has Washington murdered. First thing he does is put up pictures of himself with Washington, and Adams starts to put himself into the scene of some of these conversations. And the next thing you know, he's talking about some of the battles. Then you find out that Adams was at most of these battles and advising Washington on the outcome of the battles. And then you find out that Adams is saying that anybody who supported Washington is suddenly just taken away and beaten up or killed. And then the next thing you know, Thomas Paine is strangled in his sleep, and you find out that Madison was killed in a suspicious cart accident. And Thomas Jefferson was found one morning with an ice pick buried in the back of his head in Montecito. And anyone who was associated with Jefferson or the Democratic Party was taken out and killed. And Adams sits there in the White House for 40 years. And all of the founders, all of our founding fathers are killed, except for Adams, who had them all murdered. It's what happened. It's what happened in Russia. And it's almost funny. It's almost like something you laugh about. It's something you just simply cannot process. I'm telling you, you can't get around it. So that's the one thing. And the other thing is that when these people went to their deaths, especially the first revolutionaries, but really almost all of these Russians, when you talk to people who are in the Gulag and all the true believers that love the Soviet system and it's the workers' paradise and so on, you found time and time again that these people felt, yes, the state made a mistake with me, but that's a once or twice kind of a thing. Most of the people out there are guilty. They're traitors or they're anti-Soviet or whatever. And if Stalin only found out about all this murdering that was going on, boy, would he be upset. And many, many times, I found this in Nazi Germany too, many times, the last words out of the mouths of people being murdered by communists were, "Long live Comrade Stalin." And many times the last words out of the mouth that were being shot by Hitler, officers and people during purges. Ernst Röhm, the head of the SA, was murdered in a room, and I believe his last words were, "Heil Hitler." So let me just say this about that. I'm a conservative, Tea Party conservative. I believe in individualism. I don't believe in an all-powerful state. I'm a big supporter of Ted Cruz. I think Ted Cruz is awesome. I think he's a great guy. I'm an enormous supporter of Ted Cruz, and I'd love to see Ted Cruz as president. If one day I wake up and find myself in a basement, and I'm about to be executed on the orders of Ted Cruz, long live Ted Cruz will not be the final thing out of my lips. Ted Cruz will be in my final sentence, and it'll be a 4-word sentence, and Ted Cruz will be 2 of those 4 words, but long live Ted Cruz will not be the last thing out of my mouth. So that's what you have to ask yourself is why these people went along with it, why they went along with it. The greater good, always around the corner of the communist glory. It's just around the corner. Just get rid of a few more people. There you go. Horrible.